There is no society anymore. What there is a transnational security elite that is busy carving up the world using your tax money. We must form our own networks of strength and mutual value, which can challenge those strengths and self-interested values of the warmongers in this country and in others that have formed hand in hand an alliance. I don't need to tell you the depravity of war. You are all too familiar with its images, with the refugees of war, with information that we have revealed showing the everyday squalor and barbarity of war. Individual deaths that were kept secret by the US military, who denied that they ever counted the deaths of civilians. Instead, I want to tell you what I think is the way that wars come to be and that wars can be undone. Wars are a result of lies. The Vietnam War and the push for US involvement was a result of the Gulf of Tonkin incident. A lie. Here. The Iraq War famously is a result of lies. Wars in Somalia are a result of lies. The Second World War and the German invasion of Poland was a result of carefully constructed lies. That is war by media. Let us ask ourselves, of the complicit media, which is the majority of the mainstream press, what is the average death count attributed to each journalist? Then who are the war criminals? It is not just leaders, it is not just soldiers, it is journalists. Journalists are war criminals. And why one might think that should lead us to a state of despair, that the reality that is constructed around us is constructed by liars, is constructed by people who are close to those that they are meant to be policing. It should lead us also to an optimistic understanding, because if wars can be started by lies, peace can be started by truth. So that is our task, and it is your task. Go and get the truth. Get into the ballpark and get the ball, and give it to us, and we'll spread it all over the world.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. And welcome back, hipsters, to another fantastic episode of Hips News. As we just viewed, that was a powerful statement from the man, Julian Assange, and his speech, October 8th, 2011. As a journalist, we're going to dive deep and get to know who the man is, why they're the attack of him, find out more detail of what's going on. Is it a threat to our First Amendment, to the journalists out there that's trying to produce and give concrete, correct information? Or is it a bigger agenda out there that's trying to keep things closed? I'm Vessel 1, and with me, Vessel 2. Vessel 2, how are you today?
All is well in the kingdom. Another day. It's a good topic to be discussed, and I'm ready for all new information that I might not know about this mishap that basically is a shutdown of all journalistic communications.
Correct. And with us today, we have a special guest co-host, Miss Rose. The lovely Miss Rose, we'd like to welcome you to Hips News. And would you like to chime in and have a little say so?
Hi, my name is Rose, and thank you so much for having me to your show. And just a little bit about me. I was born in London, and I studied international politics, and I also have interest in journalism. And I thought this case is very interesting for people who are interested in politics and journalism, and basically about understanding what free information is all about.
That's very good. And welcome. So what we're going to do right now is we're going to start off and find out who is Julian Assange.
Have 5 to 6 individuals with AK-47s. Request permission to engage.
It's April 2010, and this video depicting what looks like a war crime goes around the world.
Come on. Oh yeah, look at that, right through the windshield.
11 people killed by a US helicopter in Iraq, including 2 journalists. Secret material obtained by WikiLeaks, the organisation run by this man, Julian Assange.
Now the man at the centre of it all says he's fighting for his life, extraordinarily, in this British court. He says he's the victim of a conspiracy to punish him for exposing US crimes.
Julian Assange set up WikiLeaks in 2006. He wanted to expose secrets he and others believed should be in the public domain.
I was a famous teenage computer hacker in Australia, and I've been reading generals' emails since I was 17.
It was his communications and relationship with a soldier in Iraq that turned him and WikiLeaks into a household name. That soldier downloaded an absolute trove of US secrets and sent them to Julian Assange. Most of the leaks were highly classified, and some arguably endangered lives.
So what's that got to do with British justice?
In 2010, Julian Assange was working in the UK, and Sweden requested his extradition. Prosecutors there wanted to question him over allegations of rape and sexual assault. He said they were politically motivated lies, part of a plan to ultimately get him into a US courtroom.
Julian Assange struck a deal with Ecuador. It agreed to give him asylum, and he hid here in its embassy, beyond the reaches of the law. As Julian Assange hunkered down, the US was prepared to wait. Its prosecutors were drawing up plans to charge him with conspiracy to hack government computers and violation of the country's espionage laws.
WikiLeaks walks like a hostile intelligence service and talks like a hostile intelligence service.
All it needed was for the embassy's house guest to outstay his welcome.
Hoy anuncio que la conducta irrespetuosa y agresiva del señor Julian Assange han llevado la situación a un punto en que el asilo del señor Assange es insostenible e inviable.
He was jailed in London for going on the run from the Swedish allegations, and even though that case was later dropped, he remained in a cell because the US requested he be sent there for trial.
Julian Assange's immediate fate was now in the hands of District Judge Vanessa Barreza. She had to decide whether he should be sent to the US under the law of extradition, and she ruled that his leaks looked like a crime under both English and US law. But she then blocked the request, saying that there was evidence that Julian Assange was so mentally unwell he could try to kill himself in a US jail and nobody would be able to stop him.
Julian Assange wants his case to be about free speech and journalism, but of course journalists can also commit crimes, and both the US and the UK have laws that protect national security secrets. So the primary legal question for the British judges is whether his leaks crossed the line into hacking and disclosed secrets, and also endangered lives. If the US convinces judges at London's High Court that Julian Assange isn't too ill to face trial in America, he's one step closer to being put on the plane to face trial.
Okay, thoughts, comments. Rose, would you like to go first?
Okay, so before we discuss about Julian Assange, I thought it was important just to quickly mention about the historical event that happened back in the 70s. I don't know if anybody has watched the movie called All the President's Men or quite recently, the Post. It was about the Pentagon Papers when Daniel Ellsberg leaked highly sensitive classified information to the New York Times, and subsequently the Washington Post and many other newspapers published these information, and it was really a big deal at the time. And the case of Julian is not so different, in a way, quite similar, but in a different form, because this is the era of the internet. And so back in the days, there were journalists that was using print, and when you have to have information, you have to actually have documents where you have to copy, Xerox, many pages, and actually use those. And so I think this was an important case back in the day when the journalist played a very important role in releasing very important information to the public.
Mm. Yeah, that sounds like something, the beginning of finding your sources and understanding what journalism was or is, far as releasing information that is relative or relevant to the people of or the citizens of the land, regardless if it's America or Europe or wherever, that these people need to know, especially if it's going to affect them directly or indirectly. Vessel 2, you have anything to say or add?
Yeah, this video, from the sounds of it, he admits to being a hacker in his teens.
Yes, correct.
So by that admission, that would shed light on him as being a well developed hacker.
Mhm.
So what I'm kind of confused about is he said he was getting his source material from someone in the military, our military, American military. So he was not actually, his website was not actual putting out information that he discovered. It was passed on to him. So he was just kind of releasing this information. So
correct.
The tricky part, I guess, would be as both America and England has its laws against revealing military secrets. In the video, it showed a brief image of the listing of categories on which you can click and find certain information, and I saw secret. So
right.
To release military information that is unclassified is pretty much okay, but anything secret, classified or and above secret, top secret, you would be held accountable for it if you was in the military. So I'm not sure what happened to the military personnel who gave him that information, but it seems
correct.
Like it's kind of hard, in my opinion, it's kind of hard not to want to kind of hold him accountable for putting out secret information. But at the same time, if the information that was leaked was the wrongdoing of the government and the military, then people do have a right to know about that. So yeah, it's a very fine line that he walked.
That's correct. That's right.
And to see him have to, go to country to evade being locked up is unfortunate. But yeah, he had to have some big cojones just to put the information out and not think that he would not have to answer to anybody.
Yeah, I agree. Just to be kind of devil's advocate, or just to throw this out there, little bits of information, again, coming from the BBC video. Like you said, he was a hacker, and it's stated that he hacked as a young teen, or his early a young youth. He hacked NASA, and so by doing this, I think he put himself already in the scope to be watched. That's number one. Number two, I believe partly he released American sensitive documents. Now, under the Constitution, that you have the First Amendment to freedom of speech, but we have to realize that Julian Assange is Australian first, not American. So I believe that also has some effect on him as well. But I mean, I digress. But I believe this is some of the reasons why that there was targeting him or tried to make him as an example, regardless of that he got the information from American military person. By him being an outside leak, I think that's what was the main thing. Rose, do you have anything to add to that?
Well, I can understand why his image is tainted, because he actually is criticizing the mainstream media, because the mainstream media right now is very much controlled by the corporate and the government and the corporation. So the real journalist's job is actually to find and release true information.
Right.
And that is very much being restricted among the journalists who works in, for example, the New York Times, the Washington Post, and even the Guardian. And so their argument is that, well, he's not a journalist, he's just a hacker. But I don't think that is true, because all he is doing what journalists do, release true information. The source actually is Chelsea Manning, formerly known as Bradley Manning, and he has been sent to jail. Just like Daniel Ellsberg, he was tried for releasing or actually leaking the information. Julian, all he did was get those information, made sure that it was anonymous, and released that to the public. And that is what actually all journalists do and should be doing.
Okay, so can I ask this question? What is the difference between Julian Assange or the correlation with the previous leaks, such as the Pentagon Papers? Well, what do you think was, what do you think the connection? Is it because of the First Amendment, or is it because of being a journalist first? Well, I could just put it out there as the correlation of the Pentagon Papers and what Julian Assange released is, again, falls under quote unquote the First Amendment of freedom of speech, or or being a journalist, putting things out there.
There is no difference.
Okay.
And there was a case in June 1971, which was the U.S. versus the New York Times, where they ruled in favor of the journalist's ability to not be censored by government and allowed to publish information. And so this means that the government, in fact, does not have the right to control or censor journalists.
Okay. Any input there, Vessel 2?
Yeah. Once again, going back to the video, the name Chelsea Manning that
Mhm.
brought back that situation. So yes, I agree with your statement, Vessel One, as far as him being a non-U.S. citizen and the punishment for the U.S. citizen that got caught providing the information to him, the source where he was getting his information. They met their day in court.
Right.
So him being a journalist, he all journalists should have immunity under the guidelines of the rules and guidelines of whistleblowers.
Mhm.
And once again, I think if you are a whistleblower, depending on what the information that you did put out, you should have some protection. And I'm not sure. Um, I guess it all depends on who's in the hot seat at the moment. But
Mhm.
if if you are putting out secret information, then I think that's where the line kind of gets drawn. And I'm not saying that his information, he wasn't a journalist per se, but he and Chelsea Manning definitely were are not protected under the whistleblower protection clause, which is,
Yes.
as Miss Rose pointed out, which is the rule, should be the set rule. You should have protection for actually coming forth with truthful information of wrongdoing, regardless of your citizenship.
Which brings us to the next segment of our episode. Why are we discussing this subject, and why is it relative to what's happening now? One question I want to put out there is to both Vessel Two and Miss Rose. Do you think that Julian's actions caused the current censorship of the internet? Um, Again, after Julian Assange released the information, uh, not too long after, we can't forget that we had Snowden, Edward Snowden. He also released information about the government spying on its citizens. And he also, they were also trying to uh, capture him as well. But fortunately, he was able to elude them and make his way to Russia. And I thought that story alone was also interesting.
I know that when Snowden was working in NASA, or before even working in NASA, he was working in a company. He was actually working in, I think, Bell, and he came to Tokyo.
Right, right.
And also, but even before that, they were doing a lot of things about trying to sort of spy and get information from individuals, and that had a lot to do with their involvement in the war in Iraq and Afghanistan. And it was very important for them to get any kind of information to actually make kind of justify the war because of the incident in 9/11.
Right.
That's when all this sort of like this spike, or what you call the interference with the individual, happened. And so they have been doing that for a very long time. But in terms of their meddling or sort of like influence in so-called the information, is, yeah, has actually been much more apparent now with this, increasing use of social media by everybody who in the beginning thought was a way for all of us to have, you know, information that we couldn't have otherwise. Before, we had to go to the library and look for information, or actually depending on newspapers, to get information about the world.
Right.
But through the use of internet, we found out that the way we can get information was just something beyond all of any of us have imagined, right?
Yeah.
So in a way, Julian came in a time where so-called the internet era started, and he found a new way of journalism that was not possible maybe back in in the 1970s.
So he was a pioneer.
In a way, a revolutionary way of journalism. So this new journalism is actually a threat, to governments and corporations that actually wants to control their leak or release of information, to the public.
So again, just the question is: so, do you think his actions were the direct cause of the current situation of censorship of YouTube or social media?
I don't know if it's directly related, but of course it has a lot to do with the fact the government found out, or people can find out that this way of journalism, through this way of journalism, you can get the kind of information more
that normally would be
almost impossible.
To find out. Yeah. Okay, I see that.
And this is not just about the war crimes, in the U.S., but any government in the world, any sort of like government corrupt activities that happen all over the world, whether it's China or Russia or UK. So he's, releasing information, or he's able to access information, from many other governments.
Being devil's advocate, do that include Japan as well?
I think so too, yeah.
Okay. Vessel 2, any input you have?
Yeah, I'm in agreement. I think he was the blip on the radar that this type of truth can be leaked out to the public. And since he was kind of the first one to do it over the internet in his fashion, it's been definitely it's taboo to put out true information. So social media now is definitely trying to make sure that it's monitored and it's controlled. The information is controlled to the point where you will end up losing resources, monetary resources, if you don't obey by certain platforms, rules and regulation on what they deem to be true.
Correct. Yeah, especially in this for the past couple of years, dealing with this COVID situation as well, and it's very scary when the source or the media or politicians are telling certain things or adjusting the story to a certain again, a lot of people don't like to use the word, but it is their favorite word, the narrative of what they want to happen at this certain place and time. And there are a lot of people of the world really trust and rely on what they hear in the media. And again, I think this is very important for us to put it out there, or at least have people think about the question, or have it on your mind. Is what I see or what's happening, how much of it is it true?
Tonight, WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange has been approved for extradition to the United States to face espionage charges. UK officials saying in a statement, in this case, the UK courts have not found that it would be oppressive, unjust, or an abusive process to extradite Mr. Assange. Assange's wife speaking out from London.
I'm going to spend every waking hour fighting for Julian until he's free.
His brother and father speaking out in New York.
Today is a dark day for democracy.
Assange is wanted in the U.S. for 18 charges, including breaking espionage laws over WikiLeaks' release of hundreds of thousands of confidential diplomatic cables in 2010 and 2011. Lawyers and supporters arguing he was acting as a journalist.
You know, there have been a number of cases since 9/11 in which the government has used the Espionage Act against leakers, against people, government insiders who share information with the press. But it has never before used the Espionage Act against a publisher.
Some experts say the 2010 leaks were one of the contributing factors to the revolution in Tunisia, which sparked the broader Arab Spring, something Assange addressed himself back in 2011.
That everyone could see, and no one could deny, that the Ben Ali regime was fundamentally corrupt.
In 2012, he moved into the Ecuadorian embassy in London as asylum to avoid extradition to Sweden over rape and sexual assault charges he has denied.
Europe is meant to be a place where the rule of law is respected.
Sweden dropped those charges in 2019, but Assange wasn't in the clear. That same year, Assange was dragged out of the embassy, the Trump administration soon after charging him with espionage. That, even though it was WikiLeaks that released thousands of Hillary Clinton's emails late in the 2016 presidential campaign, that release not related to these charges. Now, the WikiLeaks founder has spent 3 years in London's Belmarsh prison awaiting the news he got today, the UK giving the green light for his extradition to the US. But the court and government's decisions had almost nothing to do with his actions or free speech. Instead, they were mostly focused on whether the U.S. would respect Assange's human rights. He faces up to 175 years in prison. He's denied any wrongdoing. Yeah, Tom, well, Julian Assange has 2 weeks in order to appeal this decision from the Home Secretary, and you can bet he will. We've already heard from his wife, his father, his brother from WikiLeaks organization themselves saying that they all intend to fight this decision.
But the important thing about that oath is what it stands for. It doesn't stand for I will defend the President of the United States no matter what. It stands for I will defend the Constitution. I will uphold and defend the Constitution, and the First Amendment of that Constitution is freedom of speech. In June of 1971, lawyers from this building argued a case before the United States Supreme Court. That case was the United States versus the New York Times. The Supreme Court came back with a 6-3 opinion in favor of free speech. What they said at the time is that the First Amendment doesn't allow the government to suppress the press, but the press to suppress the government. That the purpose of free speech is so that the people can hold their government accountable for the crimes and the misdeeds they do, that the government can never hide behind a shroud of secrecy and cite secrecy as a defense against, or as a way of suppressing free speech. It was a very important decision. One that if journalists today were a half of what they were 50 years ago, they'd be here in overwhelming numbers supporting this very cause.
Okay, that's the former UN weapons inspector, Scott Ritter, and he's speaking out for Julian Assange's behalf. Vessel 2, would you like to say anything?
Yeah, that's he's stating it how it should be. But the sad reality is our government no longer values our Constitution. And they have basically run amok. So that's why they are trying to prosecute whoever is outspoken against their actions. And I agree with everything he said. It's just sad that our country, America, is the only country that has the freedom of speech. So on the flip side of looking at Julian Assange's situation, he's not American. So why should he have the freedom of speech? Is most likely how our government is looking at his situation, which is not right at all. But it's just, that's just how America steamrolls over everybody else's country, because everybody else's country doesn't have the constitution we have, but yet our government doesn't uphold its bargain on following our constitution to the T.
There you go. Well said.
That's a really good point, and that is why he's being charged with the Espionage Act, which a lot of people don't understand what it is, and even the people who are sort of like involved in this case don't really understand, because it is formed in a way that is so broad that they can actually put anything, to justify, how they're going to try him. And he's being charged with 175 years of prison, which is actually almost a death sentence. So basically, they're saying we just murder you. And if he does get extradited to the United States, and he won't get a free trial, and he's sending a message to actually all journalists saying, if you publish true information, we will persecute you.
That's well stated as well. But again, it goes back to the point of, as we all spoke about, everything falls under the First Amendment, and that Julian Assange is not a non-American citizen. But as we know, they're trying to extradite him to America to put him on trial. So since he's being extradited to America for this trial, does the First Amendment count? That's the question that I think is very important at this stage. Since he's tried in America, so shouldn't he fall under the same regulation and rules as any journalist has under the First Amendment, which is freedom of speech?
Yeah, I think that is the question to be answered later, at a later date, because once again, as I stated, he's not American, and there is no such thing as freedom of speech outside of America, even though inside of America, depending on who you are, you're not going to get, full en blanche of freedom of speech. But yeah, that's once they get him in the court and set the rules and guidelines on how they're going to try him of these 18 charges under the Espionage Act, it's gonna tell the story. And will he get a fair trial? I doubt it. But yeah, I doubt it. And it should send a message to all journalists, and everybody from this point forward should try to remain as anonymous as possible.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, being anonymous will help the situation of identifying who or whom has done what. Yeah, but with the video that we previous video before Ritter, the NBC video states, and again, you have to, like you always say, Vessel, to look out for the hijack. These words that they're using, espionage. Espionage is a word that they used back in the 60s and early 70s for a spy. So, this is, these some heavy allegations that they putting on this guy, calling him a spy, and as they also was saying that they relabel or gave him a different label per se when he was talking about Hillary Clinton, and as WikiLeaks released documents and information about her emails, the journalist or the narrator didn't call Julian Assange a, a journalist. He called him a publisher. So again, you have to be leery about these words that they labeling this guy. They're trying to change the narrative or trying to change the situation so they can get people to fall under their wickedness or their deceit per se. And lastly, for me, 175 years, I believe that's just not even. It doesn't even make any sense, 175 years. That's 2 life sentences, basically. He die and come back, and he have to go straight to jail. So yeah, it's monotonous. So, Miss Rose, any else you want to try?
Well, I just think that it's very important to know about his case and care about it, because if we all give up on him, it means we give up on all journalists who wants to actually give true information. We all have the right to know what our government are doing and anything that's happening in the world. And if we are only relying on journalists who are sort of being controlled by the corporation and the government, we have no access to any information and are not able to see the truth. So I know there are a lot of people who are supporting Julian, all over the world. And they really care about the future of journalism and our right to know about what the government is doing. And we pay taxes and support these politicians, and in a way, our information, the information we get every, in our daily lives, is actually very crucial to our well-being in a way. And the thing is, journalists do have a lot of power. Back in the days, politicians really wanted to be liked by the journalists, so the journalists would write really good things about them, and it was very important. They had a lot of power. They know that, so that's why they want to sort of influence and hijack the journalist or the newspaper, and buy out the what you call the media.
The media. Yeah.
So that they don't write anything that they don't want. They don't write anything that you don't like. That is how they control the narrative.
Yeah, as you can see with this case, slowly but surely, as we're moving into 2023, our freedoms and freedom of choice, freedom of knowledge, freedom of speech is being jeopardized more than ever. So for those out there in podcast land, if you're interested or if you want to know more about this situation, we recommend that you do more research and ask those questions. Put it out there so you and your loved ones and the community know where we stand, and that we may definitely have to fight back and keep things going. So yes.
Yeah, it's very easy, and it's I understand why we can't. We are very pessimistic about the future, and we cannot really trust or even have hope for sort of the powers to be, but that doesn't mean that we should give up, because the minute we give up, we lose our power to be able to, shape our future or even change, you know, the future. Right. So in a way, I mean, all those people who are supporting Julian and want to free Julian is, activists who may not be as, sort of large, and not as large scale as we want to, but big enough, to actually to make a difference. And that's what we do, and, even through this podcast, which I think is doing a great job, is want to highlight the fact that, even if it's small, we have to make a big, we have to contribute, be part of that small change, because, every little thing counts, and we have to take back our power to actually get our freedom back.
Right. Agreed. Vessel two, any input that you want to have before we close shop?
Yes, power to the people. We have now at our hands the power to put out truth on different platforms. So we should fully take advantage of that. It doesn't matter if certain platforms shadow ban your channel or not. As long as you're putting out the truth, it will be heard. And with the truth, people can make wiser decisions on how they should conduct their day-to-day. This whole situation with Mr. Julian Assange has been really disgraceful, in my opinion, on the part of the American government. But he did kind of pull back the skirt of the alphabet soup agencies. And in the video, you did see, what was the NBC video? NBC CIA. They go hand in hand. So that is the branch of our government that does the most damage outside of the country. And if you are able to expose their evil hand when they do evil, then you will be put on the hit list. And inside of our country borders, it's the other alphabet soup boys, which after the Patriot Act, all veterans have became enemies of the state just because of our status. So yeah, it's a war. And this war is to make sure people do not have truth on their side. So I agree with both of you. And Rose, I think she made a valuable statement when she said that any small part that you can contribute is a big helping hand. And we do our best here to try to put out the truth and make sure that our voices are all to be heard. Everybody should have the freedom of speech. It should not just be, one country decides on globally who can say what needs to be said. The freedom of speech should be granted to everybody. It should not be silenced just because the truth has been told.
Yeah, and freedom of speech doesn't mean just saying whatever you want. It's in this case, I think we're saying enough to the lies. We've been fed lies after lies after lies. And why can't we, call that out? And journalists has a very important job in, sort of like an intermediary of giving us the information so we can actually get evidence to call out those people who keep lying and cheating and stealing. And, they cannot, these people who are responsible for, creating the sort of like the structures of the government, people who are in power, has to be a little bit more responsible.
Agreed.
Yeah, that's it.
Well, hipsters, we're coming to another conclusion of another great and fantastic episode. Hopefully, the information and the facts that we brought to you is eye opener, and hopefully that it will encourage you to do more research and understanding and learn about your freedoms um, and rights as not only as a citizen or a person, but a human being. Um, I'm Vessel One. Would like to thank Miss Rose for coming and dropping by and putting her spin on things as well. And we look forward to maybe having you come back again and blessing us with some more information. And Vessel 2, as always, is a pleasure being with you. And on that note, would you grace us with your final thoughts?
Yes, power to the people. Everybody needs to stand on your square. Make sure that you're not silenced in any way. As long as you're putting out the truth in situations, then you should be heard. Make sure you take care of each other. Make sure that your loved ones know that you care about them. And by all means, stand your ground. The war is upon us. They do not want us to know what's true. We are all being censored, but if we all take a stand together, they cannot stop all of us. Peace.
Peace.